Hey, it's Chris. So here we are. November is practically freaking upon us. We are near the end of 2024. November. Usually it is an absolute dump month on crowdfunding. It is an absolute barren wasteland for a lot of years in the past. This year is the exact opposite. Literally, I'm looking at my list for November. Every single one of these so far that I know for November basically is a banger. And if you're not familiar with that term, it's high class. Pedigree, degree, consistency, things you will recognize, reasons to consider. This is actually top to bottom probably the most solid month of crowdfunding, right? It's not just very top heavy with 2 or 3, roots and dice thrones and that sort of whatevers, right? Top to bottom, names you're gonna frickin' know. You ready? Let's go. So first up, we're just going straight into it, right? Shadowborne Games is giving us Avalon the Riven Veil. They're going big. Can they set sail and ride basically the swell of Oathsworn in a completely different way? And I don't mean that like, okay, I'm just going to buy it because it's... No, like the pedigree, the standard has been set when that is your first game. How do you follow that up with now an area control, area majority style, Arthur, Legends of the Round Table, darker style of things in the first place? So the story is, Mordred kills Arthur with Excalibur, but the wounds aren't fatal. He escapes over to Avalon to get healed. And so the question now is, the veil has been pierced between those two worlds, and everybody is coming to defile it or defend it. Heavy miniatures, big presence. I don't know if there's going to be a standee option like there was for the first time around with Oathsworn. Again, just like the first time around with Gloomhaven, if you're old enough to remember that, right? Guess who was on Team Standee with both of those first runs? So that's going to be the question. It's also somehow, keyword here, exploration game. Faction-based Mystical Isle of Avalon. Discovering items of power, bonding mythic beasts, hunting for the frickin' grail while warring all at the same time. Time of me filming this, there's nothing out there. There's really no concrete what to expect in that sense. I know the prototypes are out in the wild. I guarantee this has an embargo. So I would say you might not see anything until just prior to or at the time of launch, and then, your feed will blow up with like 16 of the same videos, right? But I am going to be clicking and watching just as much as you guys are. So, Shadowborne, show us what you got. Speaking of pedigree, speaking of similar worlds, speaking of things you may know, Mind Clash is coming back to us, going back to space with Revenant and Voidfall. Well, Voidfall Adjancent in that sense. So do you have an appeal from that standpoint? What is the actuality of this game going to be as sort of a middler weight Euro style of things as you're pulling back your fleet, trying to fend off the void and not be overwhelmed, but somehow still doing it in a competitive nature? I was really intrigued by that concept. If you could Last Stand at the Alamo sort of situation as a cooperative, I would think that would be cool, but they're going competitive, so I want to see what they have. And again, I know prototypes are out there already because I asked. But that's going to be the question. How much Voidfall carryover is there going to be? Like you see in TV, right? TV always talks about what was your lead-in to your show. Does that affect the ratings of your show if your lead-in was really good, if your lead-in was really bad? How many people stay over? What sort of boost, swell does that give? So what is Voidfall going to do for Revenant? Are you going to have people that are just going to flat out buy this because, like they do with Stonemaier, like they do with Garfill, like they do with any of those, are you going to have similar Mind Clash, or are you just going to have similar Voidfall? And I have no freaking clue. I give them huge kudos for Ironwood, which is a vast departure from almost everything else they've put out there. I was kind of hoping Revenant was going to be more in lines of that. It's probably not going to be for me. But boy, howdy, am I going to watch it really closely. Because again, I love trying this stuff out that isn't quite up my ilk and being pleasantly surprised. And that has the biggest feeling of this for me right now in that regard. Speaking of that, though, well, Hegemonic Games is coming back to us with World Order, sequel to Hegemony. Speaking of best games of all time, the other games on this list that may eventually eclipse both of the predecessors of Voidfall and Oathsworn in that realm of things from the Board Game Geek rankings, the end-all be-all of things. And that's saying something, right? So slightly less overhead, slightly more streamlined, slightly easier to play, slightly better at a lower player count, World Order style of things. People who tried it at Essen were a big fan. The weight rating is only a 3. I have a copy sitting on my counter too. So your boy is going to have a video out during that campaign to let you know how does it work, right? Because I think that's always the most interesting thing. Whether it's this, whether it's, Avalon, whether it's Revenant, I like and I enjoy testing the waters. The one thing that I said about Ego last month from Bitewing, right? I'm not a big fan of bidding mechanics in general speak. And if you can make me really like a mechanic that I am not usually a fan of or big in favor with me, that's saying more than, we made a Euro worker placement game that the typical Euro worker placement folks like, right? It's the games that go outside of that Venn diagram, of that overlapping niche within a niche circle that are amazing. That's why you have things like Wingspan. That's why you have things like Gloomhaven Jaws of the Lion that make it more accessible to more people that don't usually play that thing in the first place. That is what does well. That's what also sells at retail. And don't think that that's not potentially part of it. But that's what I want to see with this one. Russia, United States, China, the European Union. Who's going up? Who's going down as you become the juggernaut no one dares to mess with? Whew. I'm pumped. The other big named one that I, again, have no doubts will raise millions and millions of dollars, Lands of Evershade, because it's in Awakened Realms. And it's a hybrid RPG board game, storytelling, combat, dice-based, insert adjective, keyword, board game style, syntax error, script going sideways sort of situation, right? My script ran out. Anyway, that's a side note from comments. But what is this going to be? I mean, we've seen tons of narrative open-ish from Awakened Realms. The question not is, can you provide me a large game with an even larger box, with an even larger amount of cards? It's, can you make something that is completely and utterly cohesive? Less is more. And I'm not sure with any of the games I have seen hands-on from them yet that I can say that as what has been presented. And I don't say that as necessarily a bad thing, because a lot of us, myself included, love more is more as well. But when more of my recommendations for their games are more of just the core box and less of the expansion content, because I'm just going, do I really need that? Am I ever going to get to that? Is it really going to make a difference in things? Or is it just going to kind of, So you're getting multiple standalone story modules. Create your own campaign in the order of your choosing to have significant events and areas, well, be engaged in at the same time. Tactical combat when you want to. And it's a universe, they say, built over many years. So, I mean, I'd love to see this. I know that people have it, right? The videos are already starting to leak out at the time of me filming this. But you're going to get the content from, I would say, the vast number of people that did previously with Grim Coven. But I will also stay true with Grim Coven, and I'll say that if this did not have the Awakened Realms label on it, are you going to be as enamored with it? The other question I have to ask, because the last couple campaigns haven't had it at any point during the campaign, is where's the mother-freaking rulebook? So that's going to be the make it or break it for me, because there isn't as much incentive to back during the campaign, especially when I don't have a rulebook, and I can always back later and kind of get the same amount for the same amount. So I love the idea of this. This is like a pipe dream of mine in a nutshell. But I just don't know feasibility wise. And especially when you've got 1 to 5 players, is it going to be scalable? How scalable is it? Are you going to be able to play it with lesser numbers and still get a same experience? Or is it going to be like an Aeon's End, Kingdom Death, where you have to multi-hand? I don't know. I'm not sure I want to play this multi-handed. Can you manage it that way? So we'll see. Open Owl Studios is up next, and we're staying with the, story campaign open world-ish. But this one, speaking of dynamics and player counts, is solo only, where you heal the forest from a dark, dark shadow. Narrative adventure, again. You have a bear companion, though. Yeah, boy. Replayable campaign with a built-in dashboard. Single scene, multiple scenes form chapters confronting fears. So I know this one's being reviewed. I know this one's being reviewed right now. I, had the opportunity, they send out the sign up sometimes, and I looked at this and I said, yeah, but, I'm just not a great solo style gamer. And I said, okay, other people, this is better for other people. I want to see what other people are going to put out. And I would like to see what the dynamic and the new type of mechanic is with this from Open Owl. But you know what? Let's wait and see. And you know what? We just got to stay with it, I guess, at this point, because Dungeon Universalis, the biggest dungeon crawl in the history of dungeon crawls. More of like your original Descent style of things where, you're managing everything, like dungeon crawl, the board game manager, essentially, something along those lines. It's coming back with a new expansion. And this was after like the 1.3 campaign that they did, and the bestiary and the campaign and the 1 versus all style of crawl that they've got going on in the first place. People love this game. Like, this is like a bookkeeper's dungeon crawl in the lines of like Liege of Dungeoneers too. Like those two games going head to head. Who can be the most spreadsheet Excel based style of crawl? Just kidding. Just kidding. Gosh, I'm going to get raked in the coals in the comment section over that comment. But it's all in fun, right? Like, everybody loves certain amount of detail, right? I was joking around with the Mass Effect board game, and people are like Rogue Angels or the other one that I always forget in terms of the comparisons, where they're like, this is really more like Mass Effect. This has many more things you can manage. This is much more deep and complex. And it's like, man, like everybody wants a different level of that. Just because it's more deep and complex for you, that's not where everyone wants to be in terms of some of that stuff, right? So that's going to be the question with this is, if this is yours, right? Is this going to be the one to get? What's going to be the whipped cream cherry on top from this campaign? And what else can it add to something that is doing almost practically everything you can do in a dungeon crawl, explorative campaign scenario style of things in the first place? Speaking of that, and speaking of things, of what are they doing new? Western Legends is coming back, right? Western Legends Stories? Western Legends Legacy? Question mark? Ron Burgundy? I don't know, man. Over 6 episodes, they say. Grow a settlement from a trading post to a center of bustling commerce. Challenges and opportunities that building a society brings along the way. That doesn't really remind me of the original Western Legends, like an open world shootout. And inspired by it, it says, deeper exploration and more dynamic action system. You're carving your own legend out of this campaign situation. So if it is more of that campaign mission-ish, not maybe legacy, maybe that's an overshoot on my part. I'll, fall on the sword there. Probably is. I'm probably just speaking tongue-in-cheek. Why on crowdfunding, right? Anything of that ilk, the campaign-ish, the legacy-esque, that style of things. What is going to get me on crowdfunding as opposed to waiting for retail? And what is the price point going to be? Because again, like we're talking about all of these things, like almost all of these ones we've been talking about so far, almost campaigns, scenarios, linkage, triple digit price points. Why am I giving you my free loan over somebody else? Why am I giving you my free loan at all? Question mark. Is this going to be tried and true enough that Western Legends lovers in the past are going to get with this? Or is this them going into completely different genre and mechanism of this? Or is this them going for a completely different mechanical approach, and the previous lovers of what they brought to the table are not necessarily going to be as interested? So can you appeal to both? Or is it going to be Western Legends? I almost said Western Lemons there in the outtake, as a name only sort of situation, where we've seen that with a couple games where they're like, okay, we're going to use the same name, we're going to tie it in the same universe, but it's not really anything related to the previous one, but you know, it got better buy-in and better attention because of that. No, that doesn't happen in this world, does it? Oh, it totally does, for sure. Interlude here with a few other non-campaign driven games, and two of these from the GameFound latest feast. The Waste of Parts, Sky Kingdom Games, from the folks who bought you Isofarian Guard, gonna give you a 1 to 2 hour cooperative game. I love the idea of this, right? I was a little skittish when it was like, okay, is this like mech building, you know, competitiveness? No, we're going 1 to 5 players strategies as you're using your unique asymmetric abilities to battle it out, taking turns controlling crew members in a progressive rotating order to get your action points to move between rooms of the mech, attack the enemies, or putting out fires. No, like maybe like literal fires on the mech. This reminds me of what we just kind of saw in the most recent crowdfunding roundup of Sea Beasts, where you're kind of surrounded by the enemies. Because your enemies are going to be attacking, you draw and place new enemy cards equal to the noise level. You can also draw salvage cards, which allow you to provide equipment to enhance, upgrade, or even improve the rooms themselves as you're going along, but they're going to have noise penalty, which again correlates to the additional enemies or enemy cards you're going to be dealing with, which subsequently also are going to get you better rewards. More enemy cards are more powerful as you advance. You shuffle them in, you scale the challenge over time. So a little bit of victory lap challenge progression. I don't know if it's like Roguelite-esque or a little bit of linked scenarios. But really, really excited by this concept, especially if it can take sort of the STL, sort of moving around in your rooms, upgrading style of things with enough asymmetry and enough everybody is doing important things on every single turn. And it really excites me from that. Now, then we're getting Orange Nebula. Even though we aren't anywhere close to getting Spiritfire, as I talked about on the most recent Where Are They Now crowdfunding video from October, Orange Nebula is bringing us Vindication 2.0. And that, begs a little bit of Vassal's Law in the sense that if you wait for it enough, they'll get a reprint, right? Or nowadays, if you wait long enough, you just might get a whole new edition, right? We're seeing it with Azul 7.0. We're seeing it with all of these, right, that are coming out with a next iteration and building upon the previous iteration. So that's really what you're looking for. So if you weren't in on Vindication, this is a great point to jump in. It reminds me very much more so of a Dune Imperium Uprising situation. Both good. This doesn't nullify or invalidate the previous, but this may be a better jumping in point if you didn't jump in already. Or, I guess the other dividing aspect here is with Vestige, you're using covert networks sci-fi style to gain power and leverage on an abandoned moon, as opposed to your, generic fantasy style as compared to the original Vindication with all of its grand splendor and significant table space. So you're getting the same sort of idea, like you're this little person who's been left behind and you don't know your memory or something, Jason Bourne-esque, and you just have to, over a series of randomly generated maps, go out, explore, acquire, upgrade, get stronger, action system, tableau driven with maybe some area control, resource management, worker placement-esque vibe-ish, using your powers and beating, everybody else, because this one is competitive for 2 to 4 players. And they're very clear, I think, over on the forum section already, that the table space is scaled down significantly as a big pro if that was one of your big cons of Vindication. What all is going to be included? Yeah, it's going to be modular. They've already got some expansion content on the GameFound page. So a lot of everything, maybe some more streamlined-ish, but again, do you have one or the other? Do you prefer one or the other? This might be that test for you if this is more of your choosing. Now, if you think we're getting anywhere close to the end of this video, we have tons of more stuff. And that's because this month, again, like I said, is absolutely chock full of things. And Tanares is coming back to us from Jagori Games. And we're getting a pirate sea-themed version. But the twist, it appears, is they've got more of a roguelite version of get stronger, get stronger, get stronger. So is that going to be a die and get stronger, die and get stronger, die and get stronger in the Central Sea? Has one of the coolest looking miniatures with this sea dragon that I have seen in a long time. And you know Jagori can pump it out from the miniature side of things. Are you still wading through the piles of previous Tanares to get this? And is that going to be the main enticement if you have the other in the first place? This is 1 to 4 player again. Epic adventure, immersive narrative. Tell me if you've heard those things with any of these other games we've already talked about. New challenges, new opportunities, dominance, reshaping the fate of the world. You are a feared pirate. You are Captain Jack Sparrow. Couldn't even say it with a straight face. But that's what you're getting. $79, $99 pledges. I mean, you're going to get your money's worth from Jagori. You're going to get the miniatures. You're going to get the art. You're going to get the, crawl, their spin on what we've seen with Odalin, the previous Tanares editions, and now this. So again, more details at the time of me filming this, but this one's going to be super interesting to watch from that aspect of things. Then we're going similar, but also slightly different, but lighter. Finally, Greater Than Games is coming back to crowdfunding, backer kit. Yep. And we're going to see what they can do with Defenders of the Realm, the Legends edition. So there's been a stream. I think Penny Arcade did it. But the question is, when you're redoing a well thought of nostalgia take cooperative game from the past that people have feelings on, what are you doing new? How different is this going to be? You're trying to make it stand up to the more recent time-based compatriots in the cooperative realm of things. And how can you adapt the mechanics that were previously there to make them, well, more updated in that sense? 6 unique asymmetric deck-based heroes with powers. Resources are given to the enemy as you play your cards to balance things out, save the city in a tower defense-esque style. Now, we've seen the miniatures, though. Is that going to price point it out from a tower defense game, right? We saw the Castle Panic Bling version a few years ago, and that basically made a, $30 game at retail into about a $400 game. And that's what I fear with something like this. As much as I enjoy it, right? I see 4 enemies listed in the Board Game Geek description as well. I want depth of asymmetry from the variety of enemies or bosses or demons that there are going to be that are mentioned. I want significant asymmetry with the heroes in this style of things. I want a keep the heroes out style of things. But I can buy almost all of that for what I'm fearing might be a miniature price as well. So how is this going to balance, as they say, on the knife's edge, price-wise and mechanics-wise? So this one's coming to us right before Thanksgiving. Either the wallets are going to be wide open, ready to throw money at stuff, or is this going to be the big question mark? The other aspect I have to say with Greater Than Games and their recent backer kit run is I have not really seen any significant value. I use that term very loosely here. I haven't really seen a good incentive for me to get the previous Greater Than Games more recently on backer kit rather than waiting for retail. I'm even thinking of Spirit Island Nature Incarnate behind me. Apart from the whole snafu of getting it at retail, I know EU folks were really mad because their retail had it way before. And I know that was a big mix up in the, big, mea culpa from Greater Than Games, but even as North America, right? Like, what's my incentive? Is it going to be gameplay? Is it going to be miniature versus non-miniature? Because again, if it's, waiting to see without miniature and a half price, well, I can do that. Give me an incentive for my free loan. You know what? Let's just stay with that, but let's go completely a different aspect or narrowing of the focus there. Still in the dungeon crawling, dungeon making, but Kids Table Board Games is giving us their next iteration of Lair. And this is going to be a 2-player taking part as member of an adventurers guild, creating, well, a devious dungeon that your head-to-head rival has to explore and make it through alive. You're going to use dead ends, traps, and enchanted monsters, and whoever can make it the best, be the most tempting, as well as be the most wily, as you then have to traverse the other person's traps and, setup in the first place, is going to be the winner. So, I love these 2-player, slightly asymmetric style games. And this kind of gives me more of the vibes of what I thought Stone Spine Architects was going to be from Thunderworks. I really had it in my head when you were going to be laying out that it wasn't just going to be a little bit of pattern matching style things. It was going to be more like what I was hoping originally Boss Monster was. This gives me more of what I want out of Boss Monster rather than anything else. And with Kids Table board games, I mean, they have done some exclusive, some little extra content with previous games like Power Plants and Maple Valley. So we'll probably get some extra, and you'll get the whole lot of wooden style meeple bling too, if you're that type of person as well. So that one's going live. Then finally, you heavy dry Euro folks are, basically chomping at the bit for this. Clans of Caledonia is, we believe, not going to be delayed any longer, because it's been, like almost month after month. Oh, next month. Oh, no, next month. Oh, no, next month. Now, Industria expansion is potentially coming to crowdfunding this month. So if you were having withdrawal from 19th century Scottish economic style, making your trade and export with cotton, sheep, and everything else along the way, you can get your splurge on with this one. Good old 5 rounds, 3 phases each of 8 actions per turn. But don't worry, you're going to get more of everything from Industria, and they've been playing it a ton online. And it's just giving you more modularity, essentially. Getting your railroad to deliver goods, selling goods at the market, and new endgame scoring. So for one of the, top 50 games of all time, this is getting an expansion. People love it already. They've been having tournaments and stuff online from everything else. So Karma Games has got this one in the bag. So we'll see how much money it raises more than anything else, I'd say. The question is, just like with Ra and the Traders expansion, do you want to try and improve on perfection in that way? Let me know what you think about that. Last up, this one just came across my radar, and it has both some highs and both some things we got to talk about too. This is Ozob. I'm assuming you kind of pronounce it like that. You're taking the role of mercenaries, hackers, bioroids, like androids, and other deviants to fight the oppression of the ever-present mega corporations' missions, freely scenario-based or campaigns together. The system itself is against you. And it's a miniature-driven, asymmetric playable character, 46 miniatures, 176 character cards, tons of events, double-sided tiles, everything else. Sort of a Cthulhu Death May Die sort of vibe of what they're presenting. And the asymmetry, pulling up on the Game Found page, they actually lay out what some of the signature items and unique skills of a player characters are going to be. But the pictures actually scream a little bit more of a zombie side, if you will, with more character abilities and card-driven gameplay content from that aspect. Now, they say one main difference, though, with this one is that it's going to be a push-your-luck drawing deck mechanic style where you're drawing more cards to make your character more powerful, but you can draw like cards that have X's on them and 3 X's, and you're out. Your health is both your life and your adrenaline. You can spend the adrenaline to get rerolls, but just don't kill yourself while doing it. So the issue I have, though, right now, let's pull it up. I go over here and I look at this page and I go, that looks great, right? 9.7. There's 141 ratings for a game that hasn't even launched yet on crowdfunding. I was like, oh, okay, that's pretty cool. Let's click over the ratings and just kind of see. And I was like, okay, Brazil, tens. A lot of these comments are very generic and interesting, and they're all kind of within the same time frame. So I was like, oh, that's kind of weird, right? So then I decided to click on some of these users, because that's a lot of users in one area of the world, and I'm hoping they all just went to a convention, loved it, and then decided to go over it on Board Game Geek, right? So this is the only game they've only logged in on the day they rated this and did this. Same thing on the next day. Same thing on 2 days previous. Same thing on that day. Same thing, they've logged in once since, but very similar. Same thing there. 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 And that's only like a dozen of those 30 or so, but at least probably 80% are like that. And I don't really care. I also just grinds my gears too, which is a whole nother unpopular board game opinion thing and a whole nother rant in and of itself about review bombing and review stacking and everything else in between. So there you go. That is November, though. Hot on the heels of a relatively very strong end of October. So where's your money going? Is it going to be tempted by any of these? A lot of big name stuff, like I said. Let me know down below. Hit it up, thumbnail. Peace out. Have a great freaking fantastic day. Stay classy. See you around.